today we are hosting this webinar as part of the Housing Action Days. Housing Action Days is a European initiative, is a week of action that was launched by our network some 5 years ago and has been organized ever since every year all over Europe. This year is a particular year because the Housing Action Days has gone global with protests and different kind of actions taking place not only in Europe but also in Latin America, in the United States, and we hope in other parts of the world. So we wanted to take advantage of this Housing Action Days, this week of action, where people raise their voices and address their demands to solve the housing crisis. We wanted to take this advantage to discuss about the role of the institutions on the way they answer their responses to this crisis and the impact that the policies they implement have on what has become now a global housing emergency, I could say. So more specifically, we will look on how the EU policies have had an impact on the housing crisis. And we will also focus on this new plan, the European Affordable Housing Plan. With our speakers, we would like to examine how effective are the proposals made in this plan, how much do they address the root causes of the housing crisis, and also how do they respond or not to the demands that the housing movement has been raising for a very long time now. So today I'm joined by 3 speakers. All 3 of them are members of the European Action Coalition. Teresa from the movement Habita in Lisbon, who will share some insights on the Global Housing Action Days and the actions and protests taking place, as I said, internationally. And also she will speak about some of the core demands of the housing movement. Enikő from Social Housing Now, a movement for defending social housing in Romania. She will speak and shed light on the EU policies and how they are connected with the affordable housing plan proposed by the EU this year. And at the end, Mauro from the movement Pravo, grad from Croatia. He will present the position of the European Action Coalition that you can also find in our statement and in our press release. So our position to this affordable housing plan proposed by the European Union. Welcome to the 3 speakers. I would also like to remind that at the end of the presentations, we will have some time to take your questions for the speakers and also to organize a collective discussion. I will ask now Teresa to take the floor and start presenting and tell us more about the Global Housing Action Days.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here on this Saturday. So as Stela said, the Housing Action Days started 5 years ago, and in the beginning it was a European call launched by the European Action Coalition, and the idea was that every grassroots organization, even if they were not a part of the EAC, could join this week of mobilization and could appropriate the call to their local context. What happened was that in November of last year, the EAC and many of its members participated in the first International People's Assembly for Housing in Barcelona, which was a meeting where 93 grassroots organizations from 22 different countries and 4 continents got together to learn and collectively strengthen their fight. And at the end of this meeting, we decided together that we wanted to launch a call for a global action for housing justice. And so we started this process of trying to figure out how we could actually have a global movement and a global call for action, given that we are people living in very different time zones, speaking very different languages, and each of us has specific contexts. In the end, so this Action Week started on April 21st, and it lasts until tomorrow. And we have around 60 cities that registered actions all across Europe, but this year also in the Philippines, in the US, in South Africa, in Brazil, in Sri Lanka, Zambia. So it seems that there was a big interest in joining collectively to struggle for housing justice, and we hope that this movement will keep growing in the next years. And what is interesting to see is that even though we are people from different cities, different countries, and in very different contexts, we can still agree on some common ground of what needs to be done to solve the housing crisis. And first and foremost, the demand is that housing should be a public good and not a commodity. So housing should be taken off the market logic and guaranteed for all, regardless of their income, the citizenship status or background. And this includes a ban on evictions, the decriminalization of squatting, and the provision of dignified housing solutions for everyone. There must be also a massive expansion of public housing through requisitioning of vacant buildings and the expropriation of big landlords. Another common demand is an end to housing and land speculation. This means that movements demand rent controls, demand a decrease in rent, demand the protection from displacement due to what we call rent evictions, that mortgage debts that threaten people's homes must be cancelled, and housing must be permanently protected from market forces. Land must also be socialized and large real estate companies dismantled to break these corporate monopolies over our living spaces. The movements also demand democratic control of urban and rural spaces. This means that urban and territorial planning must be driven by communities through democratic processes, that public spaces must be protected from privatization, from touristification, from gentrification and policing, and cities and rural areas must be designed according to the needs of the inhabitants and the environment, not the interests of investors. Alternative housing models must also be recognized and supported, like squats, occupations, and other forms of collective housing that are legitimate responses to this broken housing system. And these models must be legalized, supported, and integrated instead of this wave of criminalization of these different types of living models. There is also consciousness of how housing justice is intertwined with climate justice. So recent demands also focus on this, that there should be a massive investment in high quality and disaster-proof carbon neutral housing, and that empty spaces should be repurposed to avoid land destruction, and urban planning must prioritize sustainability and solidarity. And also more recently, there is a demand for global solidarity that connects housing struggles to broader fights against militarism, against war, and against colonialism. And this demands the redirection of resources from military spending towards housing and community development, opposing the destructions of cities, this idea of domicile through war and occupation. And just to finish, I would like to say that, and to speak a bit more concretely, and to give an example of Europe, the context that we are in presently. One of the major problems is that rent prices are too high, and that rental contracts are ever more precarious, and tenants have less and less protections. And we see that tenant unionism, for example, is growing, and Spain is a good example of this. Not the only one, but a good example of this. And there were, in November last year, very big mobilizations in the two main cities, Madrid and Barcelona. And more recently, on April 5th, there was a nationwide call that came from a dozen of grassroots organizations fighting for housing justice. So there was this big mobilization in a lot of different cities in the country, in Spain, under the slogan "End the Housing Business." And one of their main demands was actually that rents should be cut by 50%. And to push forward this demand, the unions are organizing rent strikes as a tool of resistance against the largest landlords in the country. So what we see is actually that there is a broad consensus that housing must stop being a business and become a guaranteed right. And the struggle for the grassroots movements is also mainly that this rentier system should be dismantled and the housing business as a whole should be dismantled. And this is something that gathers broad consensus, and it's something that worldwide people can support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for this very complete presentation. As you mentioned, as I mentioned in the beginning, those are demands that were presented and built from a very long time from different movements all over Europe and the world. Most of them we have presented also in our calls for the Housing Action Days, and you can find it in our social media and other supports that we use. So now let's go to what we have called in the title a parallel world, to speak about how the institutions respond to those demands. With Enikő, that will present some European policies that are important and have had an impact on the housing crisis, and more specifically, she will talk about the European Affordable Housing Plan. Please, Enikő, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Stela. So while we will speak, Mauro and I, you should not forget Teresa's list of demands, which actually comes from grassroots housing movements and people. So Mauro and myself, we will refer to the position paper of the European Action Coalition that we issued in February. So you can find that on our website, the coalition's website. So many of the ideas that we present here now are actually more elaborated there. So in my turn, I would like to show how this recent European Affordable Housing Plan is related to long-term EU economic policies, because this helps us to understand better why this plan looks as it looks like, right? Okay, so the plan, the idea of the plan was formulated last year after the European Parliament elections, and when the new European Commission took the floor, and its president promised in fall last year to elaborate a housing plan and to forward with it in their first 100 days or so of the new commission, I mean. Okay, so Mauro will add to this history, short or recent history of how institutionally this plan is thought and governed. As an introduction, I want to say that the European Commission in this plan, in its documents, recognized what actually Teresa said, that there is a housing crisis, there is a housing affordability crisis, rents are high, housing prices are high, and housing became even less affordable, is less affordable nowadays than it was 10 years ago. So the diagnosis is shared, so to speak, but the solution we consider it doesn't really respond to this diagnosis. Why? And actually this is a big difference between us, the coalition, and many other experts and activists, how we consider the impact of housing financialization on the housing crisis, right? So the Commission and this plan doesn't speak about financialization as a main cause of housing affordability crisis. And actually, and this is our big conclusion, what this plan does is to even deepen and expand the financialization processes in the housing sector. Actually, it opens a new market for private investors and investment funds, and that is the market of affordable housing. Okay. Following somehow what already happened with social housing, because in many countries, social housing already started to be financialized. I mean, financial actors and instruments are functioning there. So what this European Affordable Housing Plan includes in its name, actually it's not explained. They don't give a definition of what affordable housing is. So they kind of leave it probably to the member states to decide. And this, again, I guess will deepen existing, differences, inequalities between the member states. Okay. So the term affordable housing occurred even priorly in some initiatives of the European Commission. It was in 2020 when the Commission launched its renovation wave program. And under this renovation wave program, they initiated a small initiative. It was named Affordable Housing Initiative. And that was about, using the renovation wave money to also for renovating affordable housing. Again, what affordable housing is in different countries is left open. Besides that, in 2021, the European Parliament issued a resolution called a Resolution on Decent and Affordable Housing for All. And actually that document is still much more progressive, if I may say so, than this European Housing Affordable Plan. Why? Because in that European Parliament document, the maps actually referred to an integrated EU-level strategy for social housing, public housing, and affordable housing. And actually, they were also giving recommendations to the Commission by then to define affordable housing and define affordability and refine the housing price index. Okay, so nothing of this actually was taken by the European Commission's Affordable Housing Plan. And in this, what I see is actually this long-term trend in the member states, also so across Europe, the long-term trend of residualization of social housing. So reducing the social housing stock to a degree which might respond to the needs of very poor. And assumedly, the affordable housing will be offered for better off people, right? And people who can pay on the market prices in rent or purchasing a home. So this trend continues through this plan, I would say. And the plan makes even more irrelevant public housing and public investments into public housing. Okay, and as I said, this is an idea that I want to refer to further on. This plan is problematic mostly because it deepens the financialization of the housing sector. So, and yeah, we also have to ask ourselves, why is this happening now? We are in the middle of a economic crisis, pluri-crisis actually, economic crisis. So probably this will affect, or if it didn't affect it already, the real estate developers, the private housing sector. So they might not be able to sell so many products of theirs. So in a way, with this affordable housing plan, the European Commission gives a support to these private developers and constructors, you know, and also offers money, public money for it, for them. Okay, so where is the money coming from into this into this plan? Theoretically, it comes from the cohesion funds. I mean, that is what was said in December, January, February. But now, as we hear, the cohesion fund is has another target nowadays, the Rearm Europe program. So I don't know how much money from cohesion funds will actually go to this affordable housing plan. Okay, other resources, and this is where financialization enters into the scene, is the Invest EU program. Probably everybody heard about it. It was a program launched as a response to the economic damage resulted by the COVID-19 pandemic. It was actually this fund, Invest EU fund, was about giving guarantees to investors who put their money in different economic sectors, so kind of de-risk their businesses, right? And actually, if the affordable housing plan will also use this Invest EU fund, then the same thing happens, right? So it's a measure of de-risking investment into housing production, into affordable housing production. Okay, so this idea, you know, which is a general EU policy of making the European Union a more attractive place for businesses. So then actually this plan, affordable housing plan, actually also responds to this priority of the EU to make it a safer and more attractive space for businesses. Okay, this Invest EU program functions through some partners, as they say. And the main partner of this program is actually the European Investment Bank group, right? So the European Investment Bank will play a crucial role in providing money for affordable housing construction. Okay, what they already did, I guess, is together with the European Commission, is that they set up a so-called pan-European investment platform where interested investors can, you know, get advice about this affordable housing plan and also can get some financial support from the European Investment Bank. Okay, so generally, the European Investment Bank is a non-profit bank. That's what they say. It's a bank of the European Union, but functions through the same logics of financialization, because what they do, they borrow money from international capital markets, they issue bonds, so they use a lot of financial instruments, invest in securities, like other investment funds, you know. So what they actually do, that they don't give money to states to construct, for example, affordable housing, but they will give loans to states, respectively to private actors, to companies, to construct this affordable housing. So actually, these general mechanisms of the EIB will be applied for the case of the affordable housing plan. So this shows that affordable housing becomes a sector where more and more financial actors will enter and more financial instruments will be used. So this is actually the definition of financialization. That's why I said that with this affordable housing plan, actually the European Commission deepens and expands the financialization of the housing sector. So maybe I will stop here. I already took more than 10 minutes and give the floor to Stela back. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Enikő. It was very, very interesting. Now the floor is to Mauro, who will try to tell us, first of all, what is our position, official position, to this proposals of the affordable housing plan, and also what can grassroots movements, also through this network, do to continue advocacy, parallel of actions that we take in the streets. Thank you, Mauro.
Thank you, Stela. So I would follow up on Enikő's, let's say, critical overview of the previous positions and activities of the EU institutions. First, maybe draw a timeline of how we ended up dealing with this topic, with the EU Affordable Housing Plan. So basically, last year, as most of you know, in July 2024, the new 5-year mandate of the EU Commission was appointed, led by, again, Ursula von der Leyen. And basically, the composition of the Commission and recognition was partially also, let's say, conditioned with dealing with the housing topic. Since before, the EU institutions were not dealing with housing as a specific topic. So last year it was promised that within the new Commission, that new commissioner for housing, specifically dealing with housing, will be appointed. So in November last year, Dan Jorgensen, Danish MEP, was appointed and confirmed as the first EU's energy and housing commissioner, coming, however, with the background of energy policies, with no or almost no background in housing policy, which connects really well with what Enikő explained, how massive investments were deployed in the last several years on EU level regarding renewables and regarding housing in a very different aspect as we see it. When the new commissioner was appointed, he said that the Commission would start working to adopt a European affordable housing plan, offering technical assistance to cities and member states, and focus on the investment and skills needed to achieve this. And regarding the housing policies, it's important maybe also to notice that since before there was no commissioner or entity appointed with the specific topic of housing, because it was mainly regarded as a theme that is responsibility of the member states, not the EU institutions. There were regular informal meetings of the ministries of member states responsible for housing, which were deploy statements on need to address the housing crisis as well. Basically, in December last year, European Parliament also set up a special committee on the housing crisis in the European Union and defined its responsibilities, and putting the term of 1 year to deal with housing and deploy basically European affordable housing plan. So this committee started working in January this year, and with the mandate of 1 year, it should deploy affordable housing plan by the beginning of next year. So we guess a draft should be made by the end of this year and presented in January next year. Knowing these tendencies, as Teresa mentioned during the last meeting of the coalition in Barcelona, the European Action Coalition decided that we need to address positions of our grassroots movements and use the coalition's energy and, let's say, cohesive force to address the EU policies, not to repeat the problematic decisions that Enikő explained right now, and to address the issues that are constantly being referred to by grassroots movements in our cities. So in February this year, European Action Coalition at the General Assembly adopted a statement, a position paper prepared by the working group on the EU housing plan. And I will now go through some key points that our position paper and our statement addresses as demands of the European Action Coalition. As Stela mentioned, you can find it on the website of European Action Coalition, and I will now go through some key points. So the plan, the European Housing Plan, Affordable Housing Plan, should include, among others, the following measures. So the plan should consider public and social housing costs not as social expenses that need to be reduced or cut as an investment in creating a common good and wealth to benefit society instead of individualistic profit. We also consider that EU needs to increase public investment into public and social housing by including in European semester and the national reform programs, so very concrete European procedures that would kind of make a member state follow these policies. So a quantitative national public investment target for public and social housing in all member states, and also financial sanctions if this goal is not reached. Another demand is to exempt the governmental spending on public and social housing from the rules regarding the public deficit, because this measure would be crucial nowadays since the European Commission ended the flexibilization of its fiscal discipline policies, which in several member states has translated into a new wave of austerity measures already. Also, to exempt governmental spending on public housing from competition rules, to consider exempting social housing, currently framed as a service of general economic interest, from competition rules and putting in the social service of general interest category, then to create a significant stock of public housing to respond to the needs of various social and income categories and counterbalance the effects of the financialized housing market. These all demands are strongly focused on the public housing, which is until now rarely or barely mentioned by the European Affordable Housing Plan and discussions. As you all know, since with the decrease of welfare states and from the 70s on, the public housing stock of most of EU member states has decreased significantly. And today, most of the countries have below 10 or even below 5% of public housing. And this is why these demands are crucial demands that we have set in our statement. To follow on, Other demands include enlarging the socialist part of the housing sector by expropriating a percentage of properties owned by institutional landlords and constructed by private developers, and by using the properties of institutional owners for social housing when these have been left empty for more than 2 years. This is specifically relevant because there is increased number of vacant and empty housing in the EU and in our cities, which are used for speculation, basically, as a result of financialization processes, as Enikő explained. Also, we consider that reversing the process of financialization by preventing speculation, laundering dirty money, and tax evasion in the property sector is also needed. Regulating institutional property owners, control market housing and land prices and private rental costs, and protecting tenants from evictions so that these interventions could strengthen the tenants' rights. So the tenants' protection is also one of the key measures most of our organizations from the coalition are dealing with, which is until now not also being discussed in the European institutions. Also, to control and democratize finance flowing through the housing sector so that profit-making concerns do not dominate its logic for the benefit of private gains, but serve people's housing needs as a public interest. And finally, rather than directing public funds to private construction companies and offering subsidies and tax exemptions that de-risk the private production of affordable housing, the EU should allocate these funds to socialize housing production, meaning municipal, regional, or public authorities should control this process with oversight from housing rights organizations. Additionally, solutions to end homelessness should involve users in designing and building homes, respecting the imperatives of ecological construction. So these were all demands that you can find in our statement. And all of these demands have been sent by the coalition to members of the European Parliament who are members of the Housing Committee, so the Standing Housing Committee, which will produce the European Affordable Housing Plan. And these demands are used for advocacy and will be used for advocacy of positions from our grassroots movements towards the EU institutions. So to follow on this, the coalition aims to act in different activities that are planned in different EU institutions, mainly through public hearings that are planned in Brussels. Some of them were already organized, and some of them are planned, and maybe I could just quickly go through, if Stella, I still have some time.
Yeah, sure.
To announce some of them, because it might be interesting for people who are present here, because these are public formats that could be used to advocate for our positions and from our different organizations. So several public hearings are announced, among others, the first one in May on the role of non-profit, cooperative and public housing models and public-private partnership. Then the public hearing on the impact of tax policies while addressing the housing crisis in the EU, also in May. Then public hearing on EU construction sector dynamics, sustainability, innovation and challenges for the future of housing, titled and also for May. Then in June, public hearing on sustainable housing and the energy transition, affordable solutions for climate resilient homes. Then another one in June, public and private investment strategies for affordable and social housing. Then addressing vacancy and repurposing of empty housing in the EU. Then housing rights, property rights and tenant protections, addressing evictions and homelessness, which is one of maybe key topics that we want to follow up and where we would definitely like to intervene. This one is planned for the beginning of July. And finally, public hearing on financialization in the housing market, planned for June or July still to be discussed. So these are some of the formats that are planned by the EU committees And it's important to note that there are committees, regular committees dealing with housing in the European Parliament, and that is the so-called Employment Committee dealing with social affairs. But the most relevant committee for this topic of housing will be the one in the European Commission. So this 1-year standing committee on housing crisis. So with the decision of members of the coalition, we aim to advocate for demands I've just read before. And perhaps we could, in the discussion, also discuss what are the possibilities of the grassroots initiatives to be heard, how the coalition could also work and advocate for different grassroots movements, and what are maybe the main topics that should be addressed on the EU level. I would stop here. I hope it was not too boring and extensive.
Thank you, Mauro. No, it was very interesting, in my opinion, at least, and I guess for everyone. Yeah, we have enough time to open the floor to everyone and to have a collective discussion and take some questions for the speakers. So whoever wants to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand. Yeah, George, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentations. I was just reflecting in the meantime on the fact that we will, as a coalition, start discussing more with climate justice collectives. And I was just thinking about what kind of similar experiences in advocacy and this kind of organization we might have. And I know that each of you has some experience in dealing with politicians at local or national level. And I was just thinking about what would be, in the process of drafting the statement and the reflection process, what kind of differences do you find meaningful in how you deal with politicians at local or national levels and at European levels? Well, are there any significant differences and different expectations?
Thank George. Who would like to answer to this?
Maybe I can start.
Yeah.
I would use the example of we had just recently in January, and basically last year, since Croatia drafted the first and adopted the first national housing strategy after so many years of housing crisis. In 2025, we finally got one, but this doesn't mean much. So to explain this advocacy, basically, we were following the working group of the ministry. So we tried to target the members of the ministerial working group, and first to find out who are people drafting the plan. And although we managed to target the members of the working group, the whole plan was drafted internally in the ministry. So the working group was just nominally there to kind of give comments. So basically, after 1 year of following and advocacy, let's say some of our demands and topics were part of the plan, but at the end, with the right-wing government, the measures that will end up from this national housing strategy are corresponding with the liberal policy of financing landlords and renovation. So we could figure this out already, and basically we could build a position upon that, on what to advocate, let's say, in advance. So let's say we were successful in in following the whole process and targeting certain groups. But at the end, the politics, or the liberal politics, the right-wing policy decides to finance and cater money to the landlords. And I think the similar process might be in the European level. And many other countries who have this kind of national housing strategies are deploying money to the construction companies and landlords, and as Enikő explained, this on the European level has been seen as constantly deploying money favoring financialization. So I think it's important to follow the process and to target people who are behind this and institutions and to make pressure. I think with the housing action days and the big organizing that Teresa explained also with the Barcelona meeting and now collectivizing the struggle, these issues should be raised in our cities. And I think we can and we should build collective pressure to confront these liberal policies on housing, which basically regard housing as a market value, not as the right. But Enikő might add something more to this.
Yeah, thank you, Mauro. Enikő, please.
Yeah, just basically continue what Mauro started to emphasize, that actually all these demands that organizations, informal or formal organizations in different sectors, from climate to housing and other sectors too, need to do is actually a kind of double strategy. I mean, making protests, being present, making popular pressure on decision makers, because otherwise they will only listen to the lobbyists who are always nearby the governments and also nearby the European Commission, and who are actually lobbying for their businesses. So the continuous presence of people in the streets, in the absence of other democratic frames, you know, I guess would be crucial. And in parallel with that, obviously, you try to influence also through a kind of discussion. I wouldn't say dialogue, because dialogue, it's based on partnership and on an equal basis. So you never can have dialogue from below with people who occupy power positions. So, but in these discussions with them, but as you said, Mauro, yeah, there is the risk, you know, that they use this kind of consultation and participatory mechanisms just to, you know, check this part of their existence, that they consulted to civil society, and these consultations, nobody is actually obliged at the end of these consultations to really consider what civil society groups advised or demanded. So yeah, so it's very complicated in this sense, because very many housing movements actually are small across Europe, small groups. So not everybody can cover each of these lines of action, I guess. So people usually choose among one or the other. Yeah, and again, besides these political decisions, actually we have to see how capitalism functions and how capitalist economy shapes all these policies, right? So the state policies, the EU policies are actually part of this capitalist economy and society. So unfortunately, I think we cannot expect much more than we are given nowadays, which is saying we will develop our economies, we will develop housing, affordable housing, for example, with the help of the private sector. And the argument of the states is usually that there is no public money for constructing public housing, right? Which is a very perverse argument, because it seems that the states have money to support the private sector, to de-risk their businesses. But when it comes to, you know, public investments into public housing, there is no money. And actually, since the COVID, we could see actually how much public money was spent. We see that all the states are over-indebted, and all that actually went somewhere. For sure, it didn't go to public housing sector, or improvement of public education, or improvement of public healthcare. So, yeah, actually, the way in which capitalist society functions and its economy actually structures these policies, and yeah, and priorities are defined by states which actually are the voices of the ruling classes. And therefore, these parallel worlds that we are trapped in, and therefore these antagonisms, which are also class antagonisms at the end of the day. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Enikő. I could also add something, as now it's an open discussion, just to say that precisely because we need this power of the movement and the actions and the protest, this is why also this network was created, and also because the housing movement is mostly represented by smaller collectives, and many times by not structured or legally structured entities. This is why we consider that a network like the European Action Coalition can at least gather all this power and also play this role, confronting in a way the institutions by being all together and struggling all together. Yeah, maybe we can continue with taking other questions or remarks if there is any. I don't see any other hands raised. Yeah, if there is, yeah, please.
Just made to, I mean, Teresa also could have repeat this, because I guess it's very important how the Global Action Days actually shaped the issue. And Georgia was also mentioning this need and possibilities to collaborate with other movements in other spheres. Mm-hmm. So all these demands, as you could hear, were formulated in a way which links housing to other matters, like environment, like disarmament. So the big questions of contemporary capitalism that actually are all related to housing, and housing is related to all this. So the housing movements, yeah, I guess it's that's another idea to stress. Need this, you know, need to expand their alliances with other social movements, and also political parties, maybe, for those who can imagine doing that. Right, so political parties committed to society of equals, to eradicate exploitation, dispossession, deprivation, so on and so forth.
Thanks again for these very important comments. If Yeah, I don't see any other hands raised. I can just thank you again, all of the speakers and everybody that participated in this webinar, and maybe invite you to follow what we are doing, what the whole movement that now is global and organized in a global scale is organizing during these days, and also to follow what we will still continue to do and publish, and our intervention regarding this new affordable housing plan proposed from the European Union. So follow us on social media and especially in the streets, and see you soon.